Good morning. My name is Venkat Pulla. I have been in social work for quite some time, 3 decades, and I've also had a lot of work experience in the field of disability, apart from basically teaching a whole lot of social work in different schools of social work. Now, occasionally I might be glancing at your course outline just to see how things are. And this lecture, particularly today, is the fifth lecture, and I understand that you've had some sort of orientation before in terms of the topic. So I'm going to look at occasionally your unit outline in order to see where we are. I'm presuming that the history of social work, not exactly history of social work, but history of disability reform in Australia has been dealt with until now. If it has not been dealt with, I will always supplement that with another lecture. So I am going actually to what is called the week five, no, sorry, topic 5, which probably is week 6, but it doesn't matter, it'll help you. And then I'll go back to the other topic when I need to. This topic actually looks at how NDIS has been, what people think NDIS is all about, and whether it is compatible in a way with the kind of social work orientation, the ethics that we have got, and the way we approach social work, and the way NDIS possibly approaches social work is to be seen. Before I move on, I would probably lay on front, at front itself, some of the objectives of this particular lecture. I intend outlining definitely NDIS as a rights-based insurance policy. It's interesting because in some lectures in a different unit, I did talk about social work from a perspective of rights can only be seen in pure welfare states. And in others who tend to become welfare states or have more pronounced welfare policy, they tend to guarantee, possibly at a minimalist level. And there's also, I think the word guarantee should actually be taken away. There will be some kind of a minimalist to maximum welfare orientation, but can be pulled out as soon as resources are culled down or resources are taken away from one program or the other, and when resources crunch exists. Yeah. So a pure welfare state orientation might take you towards rights orientation, or possibly even an insurance orientation. So what's rights and what's insurance? Sometimes both seem to be together. You insure your life, which then means you ensure that in case of a calamity, not necessarily calamity, in case of death, the amount of money that you've insured for is paid off. You insure your car in case car goes into an accident or you hit somebody else and their car is damaged and so is your car. By paying a certain amount of excess, both the damages can be taken care of. So that's what insurance is all about. So NDIS is seen as a rights-based social insurance policy. Now, when we look at this in the context of the AASW ethics and principles, and what are our principles? I think to start with, we respect the person in a totality. We do talk about social justice. We do talk about certainly a professional integrity, in other words, ethical behavior of our own. And we also talk about a strong, good fit between the problem and the solution. In other words, compatibility between the solution and that of the client. So, in other words, it's very, very simple. Um, when somebody is not hungry, you don't go and feed him, you don't dump on him. But when he is hungry, the feed is given. So automatically it gets recognized. And the prompt of hunger then decides, yeah, this is time, I need to eat. So that's the kind of orientation we have when I use the word strong compatibility. Then I have questions around, do we have tensions and particularly when we're implementing social work, or for that matter, implementing the NDIS programs? Why not? And by all means, there will be tensions. Tensions relating to, am I actually looking at the freedom of an individual? Am I looking at the possibilities of his or her participation in decision making? How do I maximize the participation of the client in her or his own welfare? Some of these are real dilemmas. Some people might say, look, what can I do with the individual? He's visually challenged, blind, needs to be led everywhere. Surely? Are you sure that he needs to be led everywhere? So these are some questions. The questions come from the assumptions of two things. One, you are not aware of what other abilities exist with people with disabilities. And the other question also is not being familiar with the concept of disability itself or the presence of abilities within an individual with disabilities. So there are obviously what I would call tensions that we need to tease. There will be some implementation challenges also, connected with various things beyond you, beyond the system, sometimes within the system. And my job here is to help you to, nut out a few things, or what I would call explore some of the implications for social work practice. And here and there, I will give some examples when I can, and we will follow it up in that sort of an order. So the topic that we wanted to talk about is NDIS a social policy? Okay, so which is a debate. Question itself is a debate. And that's it in the so-called Week 6 as topic 5. I'm assuming that the Week 1 must have been an introductory one, which talks about course outline and various other kinds of things. And that's the reason why we're going ahead with this model. And then, of course, it also talks about a guest speaker. Fair enough, I'm kind of guest speaker with a lot of experience, but I was told that I'll be continuing to teach you some of these topics for a little while. Now, there have been a couple of references that have been given there. Good. It would be if you can actually look at them. But otherwise, there will be ample in my narrative that I'll be covering some of these issues that you need to know. How many participants do you think are there in terms of the NDIS in this country? Huge. Unthinkable. There are many, many estimates. Some think there are 600,000 people. Some think that has already been surpassed. Some think there are thousands of social workers who are involved in this. Certainly, we are a few thousand social workers, maybe 40,000, 50,000 social workers in this country, or even more. Indirectly or directly, we may have been involved. But there are some who are directly involved and make NDIS their um, workplace or have more clients that come in. As I did mention that I've had some innings in the disability field, and that was when we have had what is called the disability services as part of community services in various states, and I do belong to Queensland, one of the states in Australia. I did work for a fair amount of time, over 10 years, 12, 13 years in the field of disability. So some experiential stuff would automatically come to you from my experience and also some examples that I might quote. So what I would be doing is a kind of a critical examination, if possible, of the so-called largest social reform. And the only other social reform that people talk about was Medicare. So after that, this probably is the first one that has ever come. Medicare, of course, is available to all. But of course, there are limits on Medicare. Over a period of time, they started putting a few things like, or everything Medicare doesn't cover. So there are things that Medicare doesn't cover that you pay upfront. Like, for instance, you go to a GP, some GPs charge over and above Medicare, and the others, we call them bulk billing GPs and bulk billing therapy units. So Medicare and its alignment with core social work values and methods is something that we have kind of seen, and we're going to see NDIS. So NDIS is to be seen as a kind of a uniquely placed bridge between the individual with disability or the individual with disability in a family and his needs and the possibilities of the systemic and systemic advocacy that we might do and help them navigate the system itself. Navigating the system is a huge thing in Australia. It's not that, system does sometimes is synonymous with the word bureaucracy. But navigating the system is basically procedures that you follow. Bureaucracy would be probably a lot more lengthier way of looking at things. So what we will be doing is that at the end of this lecture, hopefully, the opportunity for you to take a few things away is understand there has been a choice that has been provided in most of the client situations through NDIS. There is a way or a belief system in NDIS that the control of the services that the client needs is held by them, not by the system itself or not by you and me as social workers. And that while, as a delivery, it is a delivery of services, it is definitely seen as something which is person-centered rather than system-centered activity. And it is also seen as a kind of a cost containment focus already exists. That what is cost containment? That means cost containment means deliver when it is necessary, in simple words, rather than open a department, open a social worker job, open a few other jobs, and wait for the clients to come. Whereas let it be advertised that clients can take those services as and when, and those services will be, brought forward as and when they require. So what we will be looking at is how does our practice as social workers align or clash, if at all, if there is any, with the NDIS practices. Now, let me go back a little bit into history. I'm sure a few points have been covered before. One of the things is that in 2011, it's a National Productivity Council, which actually talked about the fragmentation of the disability services in the whole country. And there was this fragmentation across various things in servicing. The rural disability on one side, the urban disability on one side, state to state differences. comparisons. Oh, Victoria does very well, and we are not doing that. Or Victoria has taken an American example, or somebody else has taken what's generally used in UK or what's generally used in USA. I would say, look, it doesn't matter. Everywhere there are disasters when it comes to public welfare. Everywhere there are lessons learned or lessons to be learned in the whole process. And everywhere there is some give and take of critical reviews, critical appraisals, compliance audits, and everything else. And people do learn from time to time. So 2011 is a hallmark, is a standard year that we talk about. And incidentally, a couple of years later, I did move out of the field of disability back to teaching. The core model in the whole process is to see this as a national insurance. Insurance is basically assuring an individual a guarantee of services across a lifespan. So NDIS, from that point of view, some might believe will go away, it will be removed and everything else. No, it won't be removed at all. I'm not saying there will be a revolution if it is removed, but yes, it will be curtailed. There will be stringent, focuses that come in, including monetary mechanisms into, hey, we're putting this much money into this service. Is it actually benefiting the service receiver, or it is benefiting all of us in the service itself as service providers? So these kind of questions are always there. And if you are a careful follower of the NDIS dramas in this country, which come up on ABC and various other places, you do see, yes, there is a need for reform. Yes, there is a need for critical thinking. Yes, as just part of the whole thing, some heads will roll out over a period of time, whether the same government remains or a new government comes through. That's the way social welfare approaches all these things. So the core model is insurance, as I said, and it has to be under the age of 65. It can't be more, because once you kick 65, any services that you receive will be under the aged care, frail-aged, or home service deliveries, and home care models, and aged care services automatically come in. And there is something which is called block funding, individual funding, all those kind of terminologies you will learn over a period of time in disability services. The funding mechanism in this process is basically to say reasonable services and necessary services, not go beyond that. And supports that we offer in NDIS are supposed to be through planning, through identification of needs, through deliberation, through discussion with the parents who are primarily the carers or the family members who know what they're going through. And certainly covers not just the person with disability, but also with the person, whoever is the carer, as to what is it that they require in order to see and ensure that the person with disability gets the maximum care. Fair enough? So in other words, when we talk about respite care services are not just only for the person with disability, but also for those who care. So there is the carers respite center, just as carers do go through their own trauma, carers have their own narratives, carers need support, carers also require support groups, and so on and so forth. So the social aim, if at all, social content and intent at the end of the day, for this is to just give a peace of mind. Who do we get a peace of mind to? Peace of mind to the carers, the family, the society, that we are a caring society, and with some kind of what is called equitarian insurance. Equitarian insurance means an ongoing kind of an insurance, which obviously, what do you think is the money that's involved? Over a period of time, it goes into billions of dollars, not small, more than, I think a big slice, 60, 70 billions, I don't know how many that is, that goes into therapies, daily living, equipment that they might need, community participation, and of course, early childhood services. Yeah, sorry, I'm doing this recording in the morning and I still need a little bit of water to drink around. So where does that come? Where does the governance come? The governance comes from NDIA, which is National Disability, Insurance Administration, administers, and guided certainly by that United Nations Charter, which talks about the rights of persons with disability and helps you understand the context. So the evolution is that the first national rollout took quite some time. In 2011 we decided. It took a few years to develop the system. Until that time, the same disability services within the state continued, and during that time, there was a kind of a stopgap services. Non-governmental organizations came through. There's again a history of the transition from the time we talked about the National Disability Insurance Scheme 2011-2012 onwards, and actually kicking it off in 2020. So ongoing reforms for sustainability of that participation experience over a period of time and getting back the basics of doing things right has also to be given. Some people said, look, we have a huge government system to take care of disabilities. We need to get rid of that. We've got to get rid of the bureaucracy. So what do? You pump in the money to non-governmental organizations, train them up. New non-governmental organizations come up by saying, I'll do it. And at some point of time, even commercial organizations like Woolies, Woolworths, and various other people started thinking in terms of why not we get into this. So welfare is no longer seen as an absolutely non-profit making activity, but it is also seen as, hey, it's employment generation and assured employment generation, because obviously, how is it assured? Because it ensures a service for the disability person, and person with disability will probably have a lifelong service. So commensurate with that, I too can get along, and I too can see an employment which is long enough until I get bored. That's another way of looking at things. So in other words, yes, those who work in NDIS, I would say, yeah, they're safe. Maybe, you could be fired from A agency and go to B. B can do the same thing. And so you keep hopping from agency to agency. Unfortunately, clients also have the same rights. If they don't like you, they can just say, no, I'm not here, I'm going away. But arm twisting and ensuring that the client actually stays also can even remain with some agencies, where the reach of those agencies, the amount of therapy, orientation they have, all of those things also kind of make a big difference. Now, social policy as such, and NDIS. So let's just look at some of the key features which probably underpin this. Now, insurance versus welfare framing. How do you frame it? In insurance, there is a no-fault part. It says a typical life insurance or a Medicare levy, etc. They increase over a period of time, and we get a little bit of Medicare levy, increase as per your wages, and it is there is a kind of guaranteed support rather than a discretionary charity. And when we talk about the individualized funding, that seems to be the core feature of NDIS. The funding is to the person concerned, and the participant person acts as a consumer. He can choose the provider, he can foster his own creative solutions, innovation possibilities are there. But it also creates definitely regional markets, rural markets, where there's nothing available. So in other words, therapists will have to go all the way to the rural areas. Once upon a time, what used to happen? A therapist, everybody would go in a go-go van or something, or go-go mobile, or a long-drawn, a tempo or something. And 5 or 6 of them go camp for a few days in a particular regional headquarters, and everybody completes. Physiotherapist will complete her services, speech pathologist will complete her services, social worker will complete and generally ask what things are. So kind of a group-oriented activity is done on Monday, Tuesday, and probably they come back again in another time, in about a month's time. So that used to be the case. So services were being available, but on a not on a regular basis as and when needed, but on the regularity of the service provider that would come in. So in other words, it's like Monday to Friday, agencies work, Saturday and Sundays, weekend nobody works. So once those kind of decisions are taken, what happens if an emergency comes on Saturday? Oh, there is no service in the rural areas. They have to come to the most regional, more prominent regional or the urban center. So participant goals in a way were seen as greater independence, community inclusion was one of those things, maybe some employment and maybe also employment for others, and also definitely some reduced long-time societal costs. Because when you have a system where there are workers, but the clients are very few, the system costs are much higher. The system costs, as I said, petrol going to in a van, all therapists go in a planned way, all of that, a driver and everything else costs a lot. So the idea was that you have capacity building opportunity. It was legislated so that NDIS actually, I think NDIS Act 3 or so, it legislates. It talks about enabling choice, control or pursuit of goals. In other words, what is it that the individual would want, and maximize independence. Now, what are the current challenges? Straight away, let's get into that. The current challenges seems to be administratively, huge burden is back again. Planning, in planning area, there are inconsistencies. There is provider quality variability, bigger organizations which have employed more people, more specialists, those who have actually come out of the government. Many of them have actually come out of the government and joined the non-governmental sector. Experienced people, but they, along with their experience, they can also bring baggage of bureaucracy, baggage of, oh no, it can't be done like that. That kind of a statement, it hurts. I came out of the government services because they were not up to the mark. Then I come to the NGO and I hear the same thing. That's how the client reacts. So basically, a whole lot of them who probably could have been vegetating in the government and couldn't, kind of reconcile with the bureaucracy. But when they knew bureaucracy was closing down and non-governmental organizations were coming in, they came over to the non-governmental organizations because they knew full well that the non-governmental organizations will have a little more freedom. But when they came in, they saw more freedom and they didn't know how to deal with that. So they started going back to their old bureaucratic phases too. Bureaucracy, I'm not debunking it. It has accountability. It has a lot of good things with it. But what happens is attitude of a bureaucrat is necessarily one that creates pain to the client rather than, and also delay in the service delivery rather than a positive orientation where checks and controls and balances, agreeably seen as important, result also in agreeably important outcomes for the client. So you got it? So good bureaucracy, bad bureaucracy. I've explained that in that one sentence. Yeah. So the current challenges seems to be First Nation people, that's the Aboriginal and Indigenous people, the culturally diverse groups which we have got, migrants who come and who haven't picked up their language abilities are still at the very, very minimal level. And unfortunately, their children over here, parents and grandparents, their inability to understand some of the systemic and system-oriented language, all of that does make a difference. So basically, uh, the elements where the social policy NDIS seems to have gone a bit rough and obviously has not dealt with is the psychosocial aspects of service delivery, psychosocial disability issues, the equity gaps, the variability in a way of the services that are otherwise given to culturally diverse groups and the indigenous groups. So basically, that being the case, we have to now understand what it would then mean to anything else that we need to work on. So rights-based approach, we agreed, it's good. Equitable, gives the effects to good effects to the individuals concerned. From a social work perspective, it respects dignity, it respects autonomy of the client, and full societal participation is kind of guaranteed. Guaranteed? Yes, an opportunity is guaranteed. Whether the individual can take it or not is again something that you need to look at. So there's a social model of disability involved in that. That is disability arising from interaction between impairment and environmental barriers. Yeah. And, do you fix the person in such situations or do you fix the environment in those situations? It's an important thing. A simple example that many students, many others who come from developing world will understand is that when it comes down to buses and public transport, you have the choice of, in fact, ringing the public transport at 10:15 when it comes that so and so place that I'm intending to take the 10:15 service, say, from Musgrave Road to the city, but I use a wheelchair, and you register that, you and your carer. So the 10:15 service, when it comes, automatically the driver knows that you will be entering with the wheelchair. So he lowers the stairs of the bus, or he puts a plank so that the wheelchair can be pushed in. If there is no carer and it's a motorized wheelchair, he will have to come out, push the motorized wheelchair into, and put you into a safe area in the bus where your wheelchair is fairly locked position so that it doesn't hurt you, and by way of movement, it doesn't hurt somebody else. Yeah, amazing. So these things have existed more and more in the last 20 years or so in in the cities. They probably may not exist in rural towns and other places. But as you know, it's always the more demand is, the more awareness is, the demand. The more demand is, more services that will come through. So what we're talking in the early stages of the NDIS, or when I spoke about this, I said, look, NDIS is a lifelong service. It's about support. It's like it's an insurance, actually. There is the certainty of funding. Yes, over a period of time, you can expect more stringent application of the funding rules, but certainly funding does exist. It has inclusion and participation in a way of wanting to see that there is people are brought back into the society. And the other important thing is there's a national consistency. Should you be moving out from Victoria to South Australia, or from South Australia to, let's say, Tasmania, you are expected to be linked in to a service which can provide you that service. So that means social movement and mobility within the country is available. Equity, yes. And inclusion, yes. And fairness, yes. These are some things which are, in a way, part and parcel of growing democracies, growing welfare systems, and certainly an aspect of social work that we would definitely recognize. So now let me move to the core values of social work and try and see how well this connects. So one of the core values is, I'm a strength-based practitioner. So certainly I love the word person-centered strengthening of an individual. Because if there's a good, an individual feels I'm taken care of, I'm strong, or I've been given the strength to feel strong, certainly I'll move forward. So that kind of a person-centered orientation is very much there in me. The second aspect, as I said, is of course respect to the individual, dignity, autonomy, self-determination, these kind of things that are very, very important to us. Human rights, yes, from a rights perspective. But remember one thing, human rights in general and rights of a disability in particular, rights of a person with a disability in particular, um, there is a better, there's probably a better understanding with rights of the rights of the person with disability. In other words, there's a societal obligation that flows, commensurates in our society with the person with disability. So that helps. Social justice, that's what we were talking about, access, equity, creating interdependency, participation, reduction of full dependency, inclusion itself by all those things. Professional integrity or ethics, by default, we have to be honest. By default, we have to be accountable. By default, we have to be competent. And by default, we have to reflect practice and get supervision. I have no qualms about saying that these are the fundamental values that every social worker must have. You cannot be dishonest. You cannot be incompetent. You cannot undertake social work without reflective practice, and you cannot undertake social work without supervision, irrespective of what age you are. Even at my age, if I'm going to do practice, I must have somebody who sees my practice or to whom I can talk about and explain so that he gives me a feedback as to what I'm doing, whether it is meeting. He will at least ask me a question. Is the client feeling okay? Did you check? Oh, how did you check? So these 2 or 3 questions make a big difference to my reflective practice. So it's very, very important in the whole process to run with supervision. And that's very, very fundamental in social work. I'm not sure about other professions. I do not want to go there because I have limited awareness about how their ethics is placed and how they need to show their competencies. But certainly, I believe they would also have reflective practice and supervision as central or core elements. Now, the other thing is, why do we talk about person-centered background, person-centered practices? That's because we want to ensure that the goals and capacities of the individual are obviously taken into consideration. We also talk about holistic biosocial approach, which means individuals, family-centered approach, community approach, the structural factors that influence the good and the bad and the ugly as far as the social, psychological, psychosocial factors are involved. They need to be discerned. They need to be, you move around and try and, some of them you try to brush and clean and weed that you need to do. Most important thing, anti-oppressive. Yeah, anti-oppressive. Do not oppress a person with disability. And we try to let the person with the disability also blossom. The whole idea is to advocate for them, to focus on them, challenge the power imbalances that we have got. And already we have systemic discrimination anyway. And we need to be aware that there is systemic discrimination that happens, and then we need to really bring that down. So in our empowerment and capacity building that we talk about, self-determination comes in. Self-determination, for instance, is even small elements of self-determination with clients who can't speak, clients who have intellectual disabilities. I've seen them in their houses, for instance. On the fridge, they have different, photos and pictures that are shown around to them. We are going out today. Would you like to go to KFC? Would you like to have, I'm not just giving you an example, or would you like to have a better meal? Shall we cook at home? Would you like to do some cooking along with me? Whatever it is, through picture. And that's called augmentative communication systems exist. And so that's very, very important to see how we communicate even with the person who naturally doesn't communicate to you the same way. Then we have, as I said before, the strong compatibility issues that we would probably talk about, the choice, the control, and the self-determination opportunity that we actually provide for them. And do we realize all rights of individuals through NDIS? It is said yes, to an extent we do that. And there is also what we call the therapy fitting. Therapy fitting means, does this individual only need social worker to deal with the socio-economic issues around the disability? Does he need therapy? Does he need physiotherapy? Does he need a psychologist? Does the family need some of the services in order to take care of? The whole idea is not to bring you into an institution, but to ensure that you are with the family, or maybe, if there's no family, in a smaller place where 2 or 3 people are being looked after in a non-governmental organization. So the importance there essentially seems to be that in the daily living activities of an individual, we need to be focusing. And social work is always about skill building. Can we build skills in everybody? We attempt to build those skills in everybody. And do we take care of our own commitment seriously in social work? Yes, we do. We do take care of our commitment in social work from the point of view of social justice, access, equity, and a variety of other things. So, where are the problems coming up? We'll talk about that too, sooner or later. And essentially, when we talk about social workers as NDIS providers, we have a recognized role. Our role is in assessment sometimes, our role is in recommendation, our role is in training, our role is in resource mobilization, getting the therapists that are required for it. Our role is in supports coordination. So NDIS, many places, there's supports coordination role that is generally advertised, and we fit that bill quite well. It's a different story. There are a whole lot of other people who compete with the psychologists, Certificate 3, Certificate 4, community development people, other graduates, others with experience, others with lived experience with disability. Many people. So that's fine, in anyone who can deal with that, can deal with that. But we might be able to deal with that in a slightly better way. Because you have a social work degree, doesn't mean that job is yours, yeah? In this country, competencies assumed competencies that come with a degree need to be tested very, very clearly. I'm all about competencies being tested. So you've got to show me, you can write 2 lines about communication. My communication skills are good. My interpersonal skills are good. I communicate when, in a particular way, etc., etc. I want to see how you communicate. When a challenge is given to you in a case study manner, for instance, I become a client in front of you and I don't communicate at all, just sitting like that. How do you communicate with me? How do you make me communicate with you? So what skills do you use to communicate and get yes or no from me? And when do you get that? How did you learn that? So these are some of those important competencies. And so we need to be competent from that perspective. Yeah. So there have been guidelines of the NDIS which have kind of changed from time to time. Stigma is an issue in mental health and the dual disabilities that comes up. Sometimes there are people who are just like you and they receive NDIS and then you feel funny. How does he get NDIS or how does she get NDIS? And still work in our office as an office assistant on a part-time basis. That's exactly right. She can cope a little bit. She can do a few things. The system understood that she needs to increase her abilities. System might understand, yeah, this person can do the following things. Bring a bundle of papers from a particular place or do something or there's nothing menial in this country, right? There's no something like class 4, class 3 kind of a job. Any job for that matter can be done at different levels by anyone. Yeah. So we have a multidisciplinary opportunity to bridge the gaps in various areas, to bring people around, and to also see that the participants get some amount of a holistic service, not some amount, as far as possible, a large amount of holistic services that can easily be brought back to them. And in the whole process, we need to also understand whether it is a complete social policy or whether it is, the whole debate that we started off is, where do we talk about this? Well, I suppose it's the challenges that we need to talk about. Bureaucracy, planning processes, and power imbalances is something that we should always be thinking about. There are also neoliberal tensions, the tensions that are associated with market providers, market kind of, not providers, the market realities. The money is breaking down, costs are increasing, so service quality obviously either goes down or service quality will ask you to pay more. And with all the anti-oppressive philosophies that we have got, we might find a whole heap of things very, very oppressive because individuals can't really afford the kind of services that are to be met with. The other thing that I think I have mentioned previously in my other lectures and orientations is a proliferation that is, mushrooming of too many agencies. Someone mentioned to me that there could be 30,000 clients in a particular area, and there could be 30,000 agencies. Yes, how does that happen? Or 30,000 agents, how does that happen? What is happening is everybody may get hold of a registration that I am an NDIS operator or I can operate an NDIS, but necessarily whether they have the opportunity to work in the entire NDIS field is kind of not really known. So that's one of those things. And some people do mention to me that choice probably is an illusion. What choice do they have? Many of them are just pushed into that. I've got a basket of services. This is what I've got. This is what I've got. This is what I've got. Choose one of them. That is also choice. Yeah, it's like you go to Kmart and you have more money, then you go to David Jones. So, or maybe you go to David Jones for the print label and you go to Kmart for a cheaper negotiable price. It doesn't matter where you go. It all depends upon the choice you've got. But if you have a choice within Kmart, you couldn't have much choice within Kmart because it's a range, as a supermarket range in which you are. Supermarket vis-a-vis the market where you can have choices makes a big difference. Private market makes a big difference. Now, the concept of reasonable necessary bottles down to sometimes balancing act, balancing in terms of your advocacy. So not going beyond the call of duty. You do go beyond the call of duty when it has to, even at 6 p.m. You don't mind, go and take the journey and come back. But sometimes you might say, oh, I've got my own priorities. I need to be back at 5 p.m. Your appointment is at 1 p.m. So the other person has to adjust. So the questions come up then as to, should the system adjust to meet the needs of the persons with disability, or should we keep on altering the lives of people with disability by asking them to comply? Compliance comes in two levels: compliance with bureaucracy, compliance with service, compliance with individual makeup in terms of, trying to go up and do more and more things. The other thing, of course, is the cultural element, diversity, dealing with cultural elements. How well is the system geared in a country which is multicultural? Sometimes it's a bit difficult to understand. It's not just, it's not, the topography, the geography, and the space of NDIS clients are no longer a typically Caucasian, Anglo-Saxon. It's everybody who constitute this particular country. There are market pressures. Confidentiality of social work from an ASW perspective is something that you cultivate, others may not. You can impress upon and hold on, others might not. So that gives a bit more challenge for you. The reflectivity that I've talked about, that you need to continue to have, also gives you the challenges sometimes when to reflect with. You may not have somebody else. It is only personal introspection. Supervision, lack of supervision, can always be a self-defeating purpose in our profession. A line management supervision will be there. I don't know what you're doing. You got 51 clients. Go and deal with them. Yeah, what have you done? Yeah, done. Okay, there's nothing more to discuss. So that kind of a line management orientation of only looking at what you've got on your table, whether the table is clean, not interested in the narrative behind each of the clients and progress behind, does make you feel that in the blossoming of the person, you probably are. That the narrative is complete when the story is shared, and that opportunity for sharing may not occur. And that could be a tension as a result of the bureaucracy that might actually happen. So in a nutshell, if I were to conclude this, I would probably say the overall assessment of NDIS and that of our social policy considerations is that choice, rights, and empowerment always have some tensions, for sure. The marketization process also has allowed for these tensions to become obvious. The strength-based perspective that I advocate has a room, and you need to continue to pursue that sort of an orientation. The third aspect is there are always persistent risks involved. Without addressing structural issues, NDIS itself will still be, adding to the inabilities in the existing system. Now, as far as, being a social worker, I would obviously say look for practice, look for more reflective practice opportunities. Whether you attend NDIS sessions, which ASW might put up, or you social workers come forward and try to. So its critical elements are supervision, your own orientation, making sure that you take care of yourself and you don't burn out. Thank you very much for this opportunity for me to look at the issues centering around NDIS from a social policy perspective. Yes, it does meet most of those things that we have talked about, and also from an insurance perspective, it does meet. It does meet its goals, and it is something to stay. It will certainly go through a lot more direction. Thank you.